Erdogan created Mirzafari with Putin. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan praised Turkey's special relationship with Russian leader Vladimir Putin in an interview with CNN on Friday. Erdogan said, "We did not impose sanctions on Russia like the West. We are not dependent on Western sanctions. We are a strong country and we have good relations with Russia," he said. Erdogan said Russia and Turkey need each other in every field. He added that the Black Sea Food Corridor, initiated by the United Nations and Turkey, is thanks to our special relationship with President Putin. He played a key role in the initiative and helped open up important Ukrainian exports that had been hampered by the Russian invasion. He said, "The West does not follow a very balanced approach. You need to balance with countries like Russia, which would be a more fortunate approach." The powerful Turkish leader, despite being a NATO member, has close ties to Putin, to the dismay of many Western leaders and diplomats. This speech was given before the second ballot, in which Erdogan was not a candidate and Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu won more than 50% of the votes, as the second part of the intense and fierce competition in Turkey's runoff presidential elections should be held on May 28, in the first round of voting. Erdogan led by a few points in the first election, reverting to the image of a strong nationalist leader against Western domination despite Turkey's NATO holdings. Meanwhile, Kılıçdaroğlu promised to strengthen Turkey's relations with the West and NATO. Turkey is the alliance's second-largest military base after the United States and has 50 tactical nuclear warheads, belonging to the United States. Since the beginning of the war, Erdogan has mediated between Ukraine and Russia, sending aid and weapons to Ukraine, facilitating the prisoner exchange, as well as expanding trade relations with Russia. The decision to ignore the West's call for sanctions on Russia so far is good for the Turkish economy, according to Turkstat. Turkey's trade with Russia will double from $34.73 billion in 2021 to $68.19 billion in 2022. Russian tourists and foreigners, including wealthy oligarchs fleeing sanctions, entered the country as their travel options were severely restricted. In early 2023, Putin waived tariffs on Russia's oil exports to Turkey, in a move seen as an effort to help Erdogan win the election. Turkey's imports from Russia also nearly doubled last year, reaching $58.85 billion, making Russia Turkey's largest trading partner instead of China. Turkey realizes 7% of Russia's exports, which was 2% in 2021. Erdogan is also accused of hindering NATO's expansion by refusing to accept Sweden's membership. Invade Ukraine. Approval for a new country to join the group requires the approval of existing members. After lengthy negotiations, Turkey accepted Finland's membership in March, but Turkey opposed Sweden, as Ankara believed Stockholm supported terrorist groups against Turkey. It is an open question whether Erdogan will keep his eyes on Sweden if he wins the May 28 elections. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said that the Russian leader wants to end the war he started in Ukraine and believes he will take important steps He said that the view he got from his last meeting with Vladimir Putin was that he wanted to end this as soon as possible. Ukraine received the growth of its territory this month. The Turkish leader said that the situation in Russia is very problematic. Mr. Erdogan spoke of a broad discussion with Mr. Putin at a meeting in Uzbekistan last week. In an interview with the American broadcaster PBS, the Turkish leader said that he felt the Russian president wanted a quick war. Mr. Erdogan said, "He told me he was ready to do this as soon as possible. That's my opinion because the way to go is problematic." He also said that the two sides will soon exchange 200 terrorists. He did not elaborate on who would be involved in the prisoner swap. Mr. Erdogan repeatedly sought mediation during the war, pushing NATO member Turkey to take a balanced stance while opposing Western sanctions against Russia. Is helping the United Nations reinstate Ukrainian food exports, and last week it said it was trying to set up direct negotiations. Meanwhile, Ukraine regained some of its territory 2 months after Russian forces took control of the entire eastern Luhansk region. Ukrainian leader Serhiy Haidai in Luhansk said that the Russian army had withdrawn from the village of Bilohorivka, but was doing everything they could to dig up positions elsewhere. "The workers are clearly in a panic," said President Vladimir Zelensky. Sri Lankans survive Russian violence in Ukraine. In depth, Russia's war in Ukraine. Earlier this month, Erdogan accused the West of pursuing a provocative policy against Russia and warned that war would not be always imminent. Finally, the following week, the Russian leader said he was open to meeting with the Ukrainian president, but Zelensky was not. He told the Indian president he wanted the war to end as soon as possible. However, Russia has not indicated that it is ready to accept Kiev's demand for a complete withdrawal from Ukrainian territory, including the territory captured in 2014. Russian-backed separatists should organize a competition over the unification of Luhansk and Donetsk, i.e. Donbass, territories. President Putin has reset the liberation of Ukraine's Donbass region as Russia's main goal. "The Donbass election is important," said Medvedev, who is now head of the Russian Security Council. Russian-backed regional leaders in Luhansk and Donetsk have also called for snap elections, and Ukraine's Defense Ministry advisor Oleksiy Koptyko said it was an expression of disappointment in Moscow and an attempt to employ Putin. Ukrainian forces, in addition to recapturing several areas northeast of Kharkov, launched an offensive in the southern Kherson region, forcing the Russian president to delay his participation in Russia's elections. Asked whether the PBS would be allowed to hold the territory Russia had captured since February and whether this would be part of the peace deal, Erdogan replied, "No, not really." He also said the country has occupied. It will return to Ukraine. It is not yet clear whether territories held by Russian-backed separatists since 2014 are also included. Asked whether Russia would be allowed to retain Crimea, which it annexed in 2014, Erdogan said Turkey has since negotiated with Putin to return the peninsula to its rightful owner, but without success.